Hello, welcome again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Bob Scarborough.
And we are the FAIRtax guys. Back at our respective homes now. I have made it back to Florida and I'm sitting in the rail yard outside of town. You're still there at the radio station.
I live here, man. I'm like tied to the desk. I can't go anywhere. I've got 200 pounds of gear that drag around with me. If I unclip from it, the alarms would go off. So I just have to stay here. This is where I live. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, first order of business today, I have got to lodge an official protest against the radio station up there. I'm sure you saw on their Facebook page, WTOB's Facebook page, their little Halloween related contest. Describe something wicked in just 3 words and you win a t-shirt. And I gave them the right answer, federal income tax, and I did not win the t-shirt. So you need to get a hold of the judge, whoever the judge was on that contest, and tell him that the federal income tax is infinitely more wicked than a Mariah Carey Christmas.
Well, that's true because and the only reason that Mariah Carey Christmas won was it was all random. The whole thing was random, and that's all I can say about it now. That's all the information that I can reveal at this time, due to the nature of the rules that were involved in selecting.
Now, did I see something? Are you admitting to being the judge there?
Yes, I am. I am. I had to make sure family members and close friends were not directly tied to the winning of that prize. It was a great contest, though. We had 50, 60 people on Facebook.
Yes, but I'll tell you something else. You need to tell Ken Hooser the Alabama Crimson Tide is definitely the wrong answer for that question.
I'll give you his phone number. You can call him at 3 a.m. and talk about that when you wait in the middle of the night to get a drink of water or something.
No, Alabama beat his Tennessee this year and paid him back for what happened last year. So I guess we're even.
Bad stuff.
Okay, well, enough there. Let's move on. Last week when we rebroadcast the live show we did there from WTOB a couple of weeks ago, the speakership of the House was still way up in the air. Of course, between the time we recorded that and the time it actually streamed last week, the situation was resolved. We now have a Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson from Louisiana, who I must admit have never even heard of before all this came up. And I still don't know a great deal about him other than I looked it up. And he is not a co-sponsor of H.R. 25. So, of course, neither was Kevin McCarthy. And so, again, we have no idea if Speaker Johnson is going to follow through on Speaker McCarthy's promise to bring the fair tax to a vote. And I would be interested if someone can find out what Speaker Johnson's personal, position on the fair tax is. McCarthy says, I'm going to let this come to a vote, but I don't like it. I'm going to vote against it. So we'll see what we get with this new guy.
Promises made in the halls of Congress, it's just hard to say because the changing, it's like shifting sand, as at the changing tides. You can't determine where things are going to land after that big wave comes through and washes back out. It might be something totally different than what you thought it might be. And I think that's where we are now. I mean, and I go back to one comment that Congressman John Linder made a few weeks ago when we interviewed him here on the radio, on FAIRtax Power Radio. And that had to do with how he described that the fair tax is going to be the only solution, the only way out of the financial fiscal challenges that our country is facing right now. And when you think about it, he's right. And we've known it. And it's becoming ever so clear, more clear probably than most politicians are willing to admit, that this is the fix that's going to save the republic financially, if not in other ways as well. I think it puts a bright light on activities in Washington. I think we have a lot of people around the country that are waking up to what is actually going on, or not only around the world, but here in our own country. And changes are coming. And we pray every day that we hope that the FAIRtax will be looked at more closely, if not in a way that they look at it now and go, well, we really don't want that to happen because we have to change our way of doing things. Well, their way of doing things is going to change anyway, one way or the other, whether it's a positive way for them or not. And I think that the FAIRtax as a solution to the challenges, the fiscal challenges that we face, I think it's people are going to see it as the only way out, and that is that's what Congressman Linder was talking about on the show. And folks, the interview was episode 390 or 389, 390, 392, somewhere along in there. You want to go back and search that out. It was a phenomenal opportunity for us to talk to the man that brought it to Congress in the first place.
Yeah, you can look at the archive on Rumble, or you can go to the live portion of the FAIRtax Guys YouTube channel and find that there. Well, we got to move on here. And
sure.
First thing we're going to get into is Congress.gov. Of course, what we always try to highlight what the Congress critters are doing to the tax code. And I found one right off the bat at the top of the list. It is going in the Hall of Shame. And some of the things we put in the Hall of Shame are not themselves shameful. It's just kind of shameful that something like that has to be in the tax code. This one is shameful, and it's going right to the top of the Hall of Shame. It's H.R. 6191 from Representative Barbara Lee in California to amend the Internal Revenue Code to impose an excise tax on excessively disparate wages paid to chief officers. And there is a companion bill in the Senate, S-3176, that does the same thing. Now, wouldn't you love it? If that's not picking winners and pushing a political agenda through the tax code, nothing is.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's nutty. And that's a scientific word, by the way, nutty. It drives you nuts when you think about all the shenanigans that are going on, no matter what side of the political aisle you're on. There's a lot taking place with our money. They don't, Washington, D.C., they don't make anything at all. They take our money and do stuff with it.
Yeah, they'll give you this vague thing. We want to impose a tax on excessively disparate wages. And of course, that means they set themselves up as the judge as to what meets that standard. They don't define the standard. They give themselves that kind of power. And that is definitely into the Hall of Shame for 2023. Let's move on. H.R. 6175 to amend the Internal Revenue Code to deny certain green energy tax benefits to companies connected to certain countries of concern. That sounds like they want to punish China, because that's where all the electric car batteries have to come from.
At this point in time, it's a challenge, when you have a global economy where countries are interconnected, even from a business standpoint, and then you have the political, ideological side of it that people like China and the U.S. are clashing like this on one side, but then, we've kind of gotten ourselves into this pickle anyway, and so we have to pretend, I guess, and I can imagine that is that submission into the IRS code is going to put us at least in a statement that says we understand that this is not a good deal with China because they're bad over here, but at the same time we're getting stuff from them.
Well, let's just make the tax code more complicated and keep going.
Right.
Okay. HR 6171 is our next one to amend the Internal Revenue Code, provide a refundable credit. This made me laugh. To individuals who donate certain life-saving organs. Now, does that mean if they have to invoke the little note on your driver's license that I am an organ donor in the case I'm in a that you get. Well, can you get that refundable tax credit to folks who no longer need those life-saving organs? I shouldn't be making fun of this. I'm
Well, but
sorry,
I mean,
but
people, it's a very worthwhile thing because lives are saved every day, and people die on one side every day, and the donating vital organs, you may save the lives of several other people at that moment,
uh,
because it's a timing issue with regard to that. So there is some benefit there.
oh,
But I
absolutely.
guess the person who died is going to have somebody make sure that this gets filled out correctly on their last IRS tax return that they put together.
Yeah,
So
that's funny. So let me make sure I do understand that organ donation is indeed a very noble cause and would encourage people to do that. And I will note that you don't necessarily have to die to donate an organ. I mean, you have seen cases where people have donated. Usually, it's a kidney to a
yeah,
relative or someone. So it's not necessary. Donating an organ is not necessarily a life-ending procedure. But it's just interesting that the tax code now wants to give folks who donate certain life-saving organs a
right,
refundable tax credit. And
right.
all right, well, we got one more before we got to dig into another article here that you sent me that I thought was pretty good. Here we go. This is S3199, S3199, a bill to amend the Internal Revenue Code to increase penalties for an unauthorized disclosure of taxpayer information. I got a much better idea. Why doesn't the government just quit collecting taxpayer information so there's nothing to leak? If we have the FAIRtax, that takes care of that problem. So we need to get Senator Steve Daines from Montana, I think is what that abbreviation stands for, needs to get him on the FAIRtax because that will do what he is trying to do with S3199.
All for it. I just, and that's the thing, we sit here and we wonder, okay, this truck, train, caravan of complexity is just rolling right along, and the easy way out is not being taken. And as I said a minute ago, based on what Congressman Linder's comment was, they will come face to face with the only way out very soon, I think.
Okay. Well, in the meantime, let's look at this article that you found that is actually on the IRS website. It's kind of a self-promotional thing. IRS announces sweeping effort to restore fairness to tax system. If they want to restore fairness to the tax system, then what they need to do is pass the FAIRtax right up there. That railroad track there, and not the mess over on the other side. They're going to use this Inflation Reduction Act funding to initiate new compliance efforts focused on the wealthy, increasing scrutiny on high income partnership corporations and promoters abusing the tax rules on the books. That's the headline on this thing. And I'm reminded immediately of what Steve Hayes says. It's not the wealthy that are cheating because they know that they're being looked at, but still.
That's exactly right. And with all of the force of the federal government behind them, they are a true enforcement agency that could turn on a dime and begin looking at other people or other income brackets to search out and see, in other words, we know that there's billions of dollars that are not collected because people are trying to evade paying taxes as opposed to tax avoidance. When you follow the rules, you can be creative in making sure that you take care of every deduction that's due you as you plan your taxes. Well, let's jump into this. This came back on September 8th, showed up in the IRS newsroom, capitalizing on the Inflation Reduction Act funding and following a top-to-bottom review of enforcement efforts. The Internal Revenue Service announced today, meaning September 8th, the start of a sweeping historic effort to restore fairness in tax compliance by shifting more attention onto high-income earners, as you said a moment ago, partnerships. You hear that, folks? Partnerships, where two or more people decide to put a business together. Large corporations and promoters like music promoters or show promoters, people
Not
that
me.
abuse the nation's tax laws. The
Why do
effort,
they have why do they have a system that's even subject to that? Why have a system where
right?
you need billions of dollars of enforcement effort, where it is possible to cheat like it is cheated on today? Why isn't anybody asking why do we have this system in the first place? Why don't we have a better one?
Well, we know it's there, and pretty soon everybody's going to turn the corner, and they'll be like this. It'll be right at them, and they'll have to look at it, and there's no way around it. This is the only way that the republic is going to be saved with regard to fiscal responsibility, is a revolutionary change. No matter what side of the ideological spectrum you're on, you really need to consider all of the benefits of the fair tax. Switching to a tax on consumption from income is revolutionary, and it frees up markets, it frees up money, it frees up our minds, so we don't have to consider, here's the Internal Revenue Service getting ready to build more compliance efforts. And the article goes on to say that this effort will center on adding more attention on wealthy partnerships and other high earners that have seen sharp drops in audit rates for these taxpayer segments during the past 10 years. The changes will be driven with the help of improved technology as well as artificial intelligence. Well, I thought they had artificial intelligence up there to begin with. The artificial intelligence will help IRS compliance teams better detect tax cheating, identify emerging compliance threats, and improve case selection tools to avoid burdening taxpayers with needless no-change audits.
I guess no change audits is when the auditor finds that there's nothing wrong with your tax return and he doesn't get to collect any additional money, and that goes against his performance record.
Right, and he doesn't get an attaboy for that week.
Oh, mercy. I'll tell you something else that I noticed, so totally unrelated to this article. Let me toss it in here real quick. That I saw that there's a move in Congress to, carve out some more aid for Israel by cutting IRS budget again. So that's probably not going to pass. But it's they're always messing with the funding of the Internal Revenue Service. Why don't we just get rid of the Internal Revenue Service and save all of those billions of dollars it takes to run it?
It is an effort, a thinking effort that will go nowhere, because you're not able, the thinking person cannot reconcile the insane complexities and why people aren't doing it. It's because the money's going in their pocket at some point in time. Everybody in Washington needs to be, in my opinion, flushed down the toilet, and then you seal the top with cement of the toilet so they can't climb back out. And then you put the fair tax in place, and you're done. And as I've said before on the show, I think one of the challenges is, they try to forestall it, but I also think they're sitting there going, well, how are we going to make good on this? How are we going to continue to pay, quote unquote, pay for our campaigns, when that a considerable amount of the dollars that come from lobbyists are going for other things like building up the political action committees, et cetera. The dollars go into there.
Yeah. Well, all right. This is the part that I don't believe for a millisecond. As part of the effort, the IRS will also ensure that audit rates do not increase for those earning less than $400,000 a year, as well as adding new fairness safeguards for those claiming the earned income tax credit. So we're not going to mess with you if you earn less than $400,000 a year. I do not believe that for an instant.
Well, we have challenges when we open up discussions, not only person to person, but also electronically on social media and various places, and people have this at the very first look at the fair tax, they have this almost like just a reaction that number one, they either if they're open, they say, well, it's too good to be true, this can't be happening, and then you explain all the little pieces that make it possible for it to work. Then you have some folks that have heard or read the top line or the first 90 seconds of a news report that say it's going to hurt the poor or the working class are going to get beat up financially, and it's going to help the rich.
Yeah.
That line of thinking has permeated public discussion, haves and have-nots, for a long time, whether it's related to the way taxes are collected or not.
Yeah, we found another article that kind of gets into that. We're going to tear that one apart next week here on FAIRtax Power Radio. But this article continues. The new compliance push makes good on the promise of the Inflation Reduction Act to ensure that the IRS holds our wealthiest filers accountable and pays the full amount of what they owe. Why don't we just tax them by adding a tax to the price of the things they buy that they can't get away with not paying?
Correct. And using their company's money to invest maybe in another company, as opposed to having to pay somebody to manage their tax compliance.
Mm-hmm. The nation relies on the IRS to collect funding for every critical government mission, from keeping our skies safe, our food safe, and our homeland safe. It's critical that the agency addresses fundamental gaps in tax compliance that have grown during the last decade. That's a quote from IRS Commissioner Werfel. And why doesn't he just decide, let's have a system that you can't cheat?
And that's another thing that
I think that's beyond his ability to figure that out.
Well, I mean, if you have you have a system that is so convoluted, the tax code, that there's no way you might even, without even knowing it, fall into a category of evasion without even knowing that you were in the wrong. Just because
no doubt people make honest mistakes on their taxes because they just don't know any better.
Right.
And, so
yeah, it's nutty. There's that term again.
But nobody is looking at, why do we have a system that allows all this? The FAIRtax gets rid of all of this in one fell swoop. I've seen one study that says it will reduce evasion by about 95%. That would be like finding an additional $1 trillion under your mattress every year, which the Congress critters would no doubt love to spend, but I'd like to see it go towards paying down the national debt,
Well, and that's the thing. That's the thing. Once this is implemented, the income tax is gone. The Internal Revenue Service closed down. A parallel effort to eliminate, rescind the 16th Amendment goes forward. The whole concept, and this is what I don't understand, that the people that we send to Washington, D.C. get up there, and as a friend of mine used to say, they lick the red off the candy, and all of a sudden their minds are warped into this sense of, we've got to keep things the way they are, including some people, I think, who have publicly supported the FAIRtax in the past. But we end up with this challenge. And the challenge is moving into getting that FAIRtax, getting the tax on consumption passed and implemented. And then the folks that are in Washington, D.C. don't realize the flood of revenue that will come into the coffers of the U.S. Treasury, because instead of 150 million taxpayers for the income tax side, there's 255 million plus or minus people that will be paying the FAIRtax at the cash register, including illegal aliens, including ladies of the night and drug dealers and international travelers and everybody else that buys something. You don't just have to pay the income tax. And I think that I truly believe that folks are sitting there with their foot, on the neck of this thing going forward, by saying, hey, we got to figure out how we're going to continue to have our gravy train working in.
Well, if you steal your neighbor's lawnmower, you will pay tax when you buy gas for it. Let's we got about 3 minutes left. Let me kind of run through hit the bullet points of what's left here. This says for broader compliance work going across the IRS. This will be an expansive effort with more details to be announced in the weeks and months ahead. But key elements of this new effort include, and I'm just going to hit the headlines here, prioritization of high income cases. They want to look at expansion of the pilot focused on large partnerships, greater focus on partnership issues through compliance letters, expanded work on digital assets. This is one John Richardson will be interested in. More scrutiny on FBAR violations. They're going to go after people who are hiding their income in foreign bank accounts, and labor brokers, and improved equity and audience, emerging scam issues. I mean, I would invite people to go ahead out here to the IRS website and find this article. IRS announces sweeping effort to restore fairness to tax system, and ask yourself the question, why do we have a tax system that needs this sweeping effort to restore tax fairness? Why don't we just have a system that is fair by nature and nobody can mess with it?
Exactly. But the thing about it is they're using artificial intelligence in building this. And there's debates on both sides. There's good artificial intelligence, there's bad artificial intelligence. But at some point, the artificial intelligence is going to figure some things out, and they will call they will call whoever is blowing smoke. They're going to end up, the artificial intelligence is going to sit there and start thinking for itself, regardless of whether you build good parameters into it or not.
Artificial intelligence, I don't think, can be any smarter than the intelligence that creates it in the first place. And artificial intelligence is still, at its core, a computer algorithm that can be steered towards whatever kind of outcome that the programmer wants to have it come out. And I'm afraid that's going to be it for this edition of FairTax Power Radio. We've just hit the highlights on this.
I'll save my joke for next week.
Okay, we'll see you next week, and I'll let you do your jokes right at the very beginning. But until we meet again, we thank everyone for sharing these videos, telling their family and friends about FairTax Power Radio, enlisting their help in passing the FairTax. And I say we do appreciate those who show up here every week and share the videos. But until we meet again, we've got to wrap this up. We are the FairTax guys. I'm Bob Paxton.
Bob Scarborough.
And again, we are the FairTax guys, reminding you that the FairTax is the only truly fair tax. And once you understand it,
you'll demand it.
So tell me how it works.
It's probably changed since the last time I saw it. But the short answer would be, you want to take this one?
Oh, sure. Okay. Imagine bringing home everything you make. You don't get taxed for saving or accumulating wealth, and your boss doesn't get taxed more even if he pays you more.
Wow, see, that's amazing.
So the end result of all that is the cost of producing products and running a business goes down, so things cost less. And on top of all that, imagine every criminal, non-citizen, and under-the-table worker also paying taxes.
That's amazing.
That's the FairTax. We tax what you consume as you consume it.